I believe that there are latent systems in the brain and body that have to be activated in order for us to have a lucid or mystical moment. I've been chasing the mystical now for at least 20 years, and I think people start out in a spiritual quest for a lot of reasons. Some people want to be abundant, some people want to be healthy, some people want better relationships, and that's kind of the reason why people start. But as they start creating things they want in their life, and as they start connecting to this invisible field of information called the quantum field, you know, that's that field is made up of energy, and energy is frequency, and all frequency carries information. When you can hook up to that field, then your brain processes a new stream of consciousness, and that consciousness coexists with energy. So all of a sudden you have a very transcendental moment, and your inner world starts becoming more real than your outer world. And those moments then leave lasting impressions in our brain, because you feel the energy of that experience, and when you feel altered in some way, because you feel more electric or more alive, you pay more attention to the images in your brain, and you're starting to create memories. And now the brain becomes wired differently, and I think that you perceive a broader spectrum of reality. In fact, if you study brainwave technology, people that have near-death experiences, the majority of those people after that experience, they live in the brainwave frequency of alpha. They don't go into beta or high beta. High beta is kind of the stress response. They tend to be more relaxed because they no longer have a fear of death. And I think that most of our fears come from that fear of death. So they're more present, they're more calm, they're more creative, they're paying attention more to their inner world of thoughts and feelings, and they're not so distracted by all the stressors or stimulation in their outer world. They want to make a difference in the world. They want to contribute. They know that their mission isn't over, so they're more purpose driven, or more mission driven. And for me, you just don't have to die to do that. Part of you has to die. That's all. And so, I don't know, I've had so many crazy mystical experiences. I think one of the biggest lies we've ever been told is that we're linear beings living a linear life. I now know that we're dimensional beings living a dimensional life. And when the doors of dimension open to us, and you have one of those transcendental moments, think about it as a full-on sensory experience without your senses. Now, if we're sitting here and your senses were heightened by 25%, everything you were seeing, everything you were hearing, everything you were smelling, everything you were tasting, everything you were feeling, if your senses were heightened by 25%, your awareness of everything around you would be heightened. Well, awareness is consciousness, and you can't have consciousness without energy. So what happens is you find a person all of a sudden immersed in another dimension. Just a whole different reality that appears more real than this, because you're more aware. But their eyes are closed, and they're not using their senses. So then there are latent systems in the brain that switch on that cause us to all of a sudden wake up to a greater level of awareness of how reality is, and some veil, some conditioning is removed. So my journey has always been that process, because when I have the mystical experience, the common thing that when I come back to Joe Dispenza is, the common thought I have is, you have this all wrong. I just say, I have this all wrong, because you wake up to what life is really about. And so you can't go back to business as usual after that. You can't be the same person, because you get a glimpse of the way reality is. So, I talk about one in the beginning of Becoming Supernatural, where I have an experience of myself as a child, and then in the next moment I have an experience of myself as my future self. And that started my journey, and then I've had experiences where I've been in other lifetimes, that has happened. They're all happening right now. So just recently, I was in a hotel in Los Angeles, and I was leaning back. I'm getting ready to go to sleep, and I just kind of opened my eyes before I went to sleep, and this is a key point. I was really tired. So I know my brain waves were moving from beta to alpha to theta. Theta is that kind of realm where you're half awake and half asleep, and there's a little door where you all of a sudden can go very lucid. And my body wanted to fall asleep, but out of the corner of my eye, I just saw these very, very specific geometric patterns. I could see them in the room. And I now know that when I see those patterns, those fractal patterns, that they're standing waves of information. It's frequency interfering that's creating a very coherent packet of information. And when I see them, I know that my pineal gland, that antenna in the back of the brain, is going to transduce. A transducer is something that takes frequency or some type of energy and turns it into another form, like a television takes television waves and turns it into a picture. That's what the pineal gland does. It's like an antenna. So you tune into a frequency that's vibrating faster than the ceiling of the speed of light, and now you're going quantum. So I just had this, saw it out of the corner of my eye, and all of a sudden, I've learned over time that you're not supposed to do anything, try to make anything happen. You're just supposed to just observe it and surrender.
Which is not always easy.
Not always easy, but I've done the opposite enough times to go, oh, I lost it. You know? So I
just relaxed?
I just relaxed and I just observed it. I didn't do anything, and all of a sudden, the room started filling up. The volume of the room started filling up with these patterns. And they looked like filaments of light, but frozen, like I could see them. And the whole room filled up, and then I kind of looked, and all turned into this moving dimensions, like a wormhole.
Like a tunnel.
Like a tunnel. And I looked down the tunnel, and I realized that something was observing me from maybe another dimension. I don't know. I just noticed that there was a consciousness observing me.
Like the eye of the universe.
Could have been the eye of the universe. It could have been just something. But I never tried to figure that out. I just had a sense like, oh, someone's observing me, or something's observing me. So I closed my eyes, and the next thing you know, that energy moves into my nervous system, and I just feel this incredible sense of love, like, oof, love, and not love like, like you have love for your pet, or love for your partner, love for your kids.
Powerful love.
Like a very organized, super orderly level of energy that causes you to feel in every cell of your body this frequency that's very organized, that you can only call wholeness or love or oneness or immense gratitude. And I just kind of surrendered to it, and then I went to sleep. So
wow.
I had a few days later, and I went back to my home, and this was just recently, and something told me to not sleep in the bedroom I normally sleep in, to take a walk and sleep in another bedroom. So I was unpacking from my trip, and I'm just like, I'm going to sleep in the other bedroom. And I just went, and I laid down, and all of a sudden I started feeling the feeling that I had felt. And the moment I recognized that feeling, I knew that that energy was present, and my nervous system was tuning into it. Think about emotions, or energy in motion. More survival emotions like anger and pain and suffering and guilt and fear. They're slower vibrational energies, so we interpret them as chemical. But the higher ones are electric. So I was feeling this kind of electric, familiar energy, and I knew it was. I could describe it as an emotion, but if I were to describe it as an emotion, it would be like awe or incredible love, like ecstasy. But I was not trying to make it happen. I just was kind of feeling it. So the moment I felt that feeling, I was associating it with those patterns. And with my eyes closed, I started to see those patterns like in the infinite void. That when we sleep, we close our eyes and we see blackness. And they were kind of taking place. And I surrendered to them, and all of a sudden, I was standing on the stage. We were doing a week-long event in Berlin for a big audience that was taking place in about a week. And I was standing on the stage delivering a teaching. And at the same time that I was standing on the stage delivering the teaching, I was observing myself. And I realized that I was observing myself from one of those wormholes. And I realized that maybe it was me observing me all along when I looked down the initial wormhole. And at the same exact time that I was delivering the teaching in real time, observing myself from another dimension, I was laying in bed, and I was semi-awake, and I was creating the lecture from my bed. So I was experiencing three aspects of me all at once at the same time. So fast forward, to the
That
event.
could be disturbing.
It could be, but I don't really. I think it could be because some people have those moments, and if they're healthy, well-balanced people, the experience you integrate over time into your neurological network. I wasn't afraid. I just was like, wow, I'm more than just local Joe Dispenza. That we exist as an awareness in many spaces and many times. And I think that's when we get closer to a greater level of oneness. Oneness means there's no separation, right? So time becomes an illusion as well. Because time is separation between 2 points of consciousness. So when someone like that, when someone has an experience like that that's healthy and well integrated, they integrate that. If you are having them too often, you know, that could be almost like that psychosis, like that schizophrenia, because you can't function. You can't function in your world. So anyway, fast forward to the event we had in Berlin, and I walk out when I get there, and it is the exact stage, black stage, exact room. I never saw the room. My staff, you know, organized the event, and when I was doing the lecture, closing lecture on Sunday, here I am standing on the stage, and I have what I would call a deja vu on steroids. It wasn't just like, you know, like a kind of familiarity. It was kind of like, I was kind of like, I knew that now I'm Joe Dispenza, aware in my future, aware that I created it from my bed, whenever that is, that's happening at the same exact time. While I'm observing myself doing the talk, you realize that in the quantum, time is eternal. There's an infinite amount of time, and if you have an infinite amount of time, you can do a lot of things, which means there's an infinite number of possibilities. Imagine if you had all the time in the world. You could get as much done as you wanted, and then you could get even things done you haven't thought of. So that's potential, right? So when you kind of step into that realm, you start bleeding through into that quantum, time becomes very elusive. There's now, your past, present, and future are happening simultaneously. So the simultaneity of me lecturing now as my future, I'm still aware as me in my bed, creating the lecture. I'm lucid, and I'm dreaming that. Better said, I'm dreaming that lecture consciously, and I'm impressed while I'm laying in bed with myself that this is the teaching I'm going to do. And I don't know, maybe my future self is creating the past self. It doesn't matter. It's just there's all happening in the present moment. Now, how is that relevant to you and I and functioning in our world? Well, it means then that you can change your future, you could change your past, you could change anything from this place because it's all happening in the present moment. I think that when you are no longer interested in a lot of the mundane things that we're seduced into thinking are so important, wealth or health, I mean, all of the things that, you know, money and possessions and people, you realize that none of those things make you happy, right? So you start asking bigger questions, right? Who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose in life? What happens when I die? Am I eternal? You know, what's the soul? I mean, these are important questions that cause us to start to no longer be so preoccupied with all of those things. And I think that the contemplation process of thinking about them is the building process neurologically. We're starting to install circuitry in our brain, and as we start to contemplate, we kind of break the hardwired programs of thinking in the same way, and knowledge then becomes the raw materials that allow us to do that. So all of a sudden we can't answer the questions. We pick up a book and we read a book about it, and we go, God, I knew that. Something innately told me that was true. And so then you start, instead of thinking about the news, or you start thinking about your finances, you find yourself driving the car thinking about what you just learned, and you start making your brain fire in new sequences and new patterns and new combinations. And whenever you make your brain work differently, you're changing your mind. So as you keep reminding yourself of what you're doing or what you're learning, you start installing the neurological hardware in your brain in preparation for the experience. So my interest is to demystify that process so that all of us have within our reach the ability to experience it.